Hi, this is Ethan Heisler, and I'm the author of the Bank Treasury Newsletter, as well as the co-host and author of KBRA's new Bank Talk series, the podcast, and Bank Talk, the after show. I wanted to take a few moments of your time to introduce myself to KBRA's subscribers who may not be familiar with the newsletter and my role at KBRA, and also to highlight for you some of the key topics that you can find covered in my publications that I think would be of fairly broad interest to anyone who follows the banking industry. A little bit on myself. I joined the corporate bond research team at Salomon Brothers back in '94, which became Citigroup today, and was an II-ranked sell-side analyst covering domestic and Yankee bank bonds. A decade later, I left research and went to the sales group that covered these same banks for mortgage-backed and other fixed income product as a bank resource. The resource role was part client relationship, part go-to, part Rolodex, the network, and big picture guy. And if a customer had an accounting question, a regulatory capital question, a markets rates question, I would be the guy you call first. And if I could not answer the question, I'd be the guy who knows the person or knew the person who does. So I started the newsletter back in 2004 when I moved from research to, and have been publishing it ever since then as a kind of a monthly blog. It was intended to recap the themes I would hear in my travels with the sales force, meeting with the treasurers, the funding heads, the portfolio managers, derivative managers, and ALCO heads of these banks, a community sounding board for their perspective on interest rates and the Fed, deposit beta, loan demand, investment portfolio strategy, bank regulations, and accounting. I have to say, the last 15 years have been a great time to focus on regulations and accounting. And even before Dodd-Frank, we had stuff, and then the rollout of Basel III, and now the recalibration of those rules. So in addition to the newsletter, I also publish a monthly chart deck. Each edition has 10 graphs that are intended to tell a story about deposit trends, loan demand, regulatory capital, net interest margin, return on equity, things like that. The chart deck is intended as a standalone report for our readers who like the newsletter, but as they often tell me, have no time to read it, and just want the short highlights. I also recommend to you all my new Bank Talk series. The podcasts and the after shows are in with Van Hesser, the head of the Financial Institutions Group and Corporate Group, and we both talk together about topics in the bank space. My big themes today that you can find in the latest newsletters and Bank Talks are: 1, the challenging bond markets for bank treasurers in a flat yield curve; 2, the phase out of LIBOR that will have significant implications for bank ALCO; 3, CECL, current expected credit loss, which will penalize regional and community banks focused on the commercial real estate space; 4, the underwhelming regulatory rollback. So far, I think things like changing the LCR to include munis will be negligible at best, and you'll find other comments on the rest of the rollback in the newsletters. And finally, fintech, because I think mobile digital banking will open the door to branchless banks and more competition for deposits. I'll leave it there. And I invite you all to check out the newsletter and the Bank Talks. Please feel free to reach back with questions, comments, and suggestions. Oh, and just one more thing before I forget. KBRA is hosting a regional and community bank symposium in Washington, D.C. on November 13th. Look for the invite, or let us know if you can confirm. It should be very informative and I think offer some great perspective. I'm Ethan Heisler. Thanks for your time.